The monastery loomed around them like a frozen tome, its ancient stones soaked in centuries of silence and shadow. The echoing chants that had haunted their every step now seemed to pulse with a life of their own, threading through the air like a suffocating breeze. Marcus stood rigid in the grand hall, the flickering lantern light casting long, quivering shadows against the stone walls. His journal lay open on a nearby pew, but his fingers were clenched tight, knuckles white. The notes he had taken felt futile now, mere scraps in a storm of incomprehensible horror. Elena moved forward with a quiet grace, her dark eyes reflecting the wavering light. She raised her voice, soft and trembling, and began to hum a melody that twisted and turned like the dissonant echoes of the choir itself. Her lips parted, shaping the ancient chants she had heard in the empty corridors, her voice waving fragile threads into the oppressive silence. Around her, the air shifted, a tangible current swirling like a cold wind that seemed to breathe and sigh with the monks' lost souls. Marcus's breath caught. The rational mind that had driven him to this cursed place faltered in the face of this spectral symphony. He paced restlessly, eyes darting to the dark corners where shadows pooled like ink. "Elena," he said, voice strained, "what are you doing? It's madness." She did not stop. "No," she whispered, "it's a connection. We can reach them." Jonas stepped forward, his muscular frame taut with frustration. "Reach them? Or get swallowed whole like the others?" His scowl deepened, voice sharp as broken glass. "We're wasting time while this place drags us down." The tension snapped like a brittle wire. Marcus turned on Jonas, eyes blazing with a desperate fire. "And what would you have us do? Run blindly into the storm? There's more at stake here than your cynicism." Jonas's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Faith won't save us. Only getting out alive will." The heated exchange echoed through the stone corridors, the voices of men clashing amid the choir's relentless song. Sylvia Klein, standing apart with her instruments, adjusted her glasses nervously, eyes flicking between the arguing men and the ephemeral shadows that seemed to move just beyond sight. Suddenly, a chill swept through the hall. A wraith-like figure emerged from the gloom. Father Ambrose, his robed form drifting silently, hollow eyes reflecting centuries of sorrow and regret. The team froze, the air thickening with a heavy stillness. The apparition's gaze settled on each of them in turn, a silent judgment that pressed on their very souls. In that moment, Marcus's stubborn denial shattered like brittle glass. The rational world he clung to crumbled beneath the weight of this haunted place. Elena stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Father Ambrose," she called softly, "we seek to understand. To end this suffering, tell us what must be done." The ghost's form flickered, a whisper of movement that seemed more a presence than a being. The choir's chants swelled around them, a cacophony of beauty and terror intertwined. The choice was clear: to confront the darkness or be consumed by it. As the spectral hymn reached a crescendo, the survivors stood at the breaking point, their fates intertwined with the eternal song of the hollow choir. The night stretched on, endless and cold, as the ancient monastery waited patient and unforgiving. But within the depths of despair, a fragile hope lingered. Could the echoes of faith, twisted though they were, still hold the key to salvation? Or would the choir claim them all, voices lost in the frozen abyss forever? The unanswered question hung in the frigid air, a haunting refrain to the horror that had become their reality. And as the last flicker of light dimmed, the great stones whispered their endless litany, a song of faith, madness, and frozen fear. The cold was no longer just a feature of the mountain air or the stone walls that enclosed them. It had become something else entirely. It seeped into their bones, a creeping frost that whispered warnings with every breath they took. The monastery had swallowed Jonas, and with him, whatever sense of safety the expedition once held had crumbled into dust. Marcus Hale stood motionless in the corridor where Jonas had last been seen, his sharp eyes scanning the emptiness that seemed to stretch into an abyss. The faint chanting, once a distant echo, now filled the halls with a maddening insistence, rising and falling like waves, crushing relentlessly against a cliff. It was no longer just sound, it was a presence, a force that clawed at the edges of his sanity. His hands trembled despite himself as he clutched his journal, the pages filled with meticulous notes that now felt woefully inadequate. "Elena," he called softly, as though his voice alone might shatter the fragile veil of silence that had settled. "We need to regroup. We can't let this place break us apart." From deeper within the monastery, Elena Voss emerged, her dark hair draped loosely over her shoulders, eyes wide but calm. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost otherworldly in the oppressive atmosphere. Kneeling on the icy floor, she began to hum the haunting chants that had plagued their nights and days. Her voice was soft, tentative, weaving through the endless chorus like a thread of fragile hope. Marcus watched, a mixture of awe and terror stirring within him. Elena's connection to the monastery's spectral choir was unsettling yet strangely comforting. She was reaching out to the unseen, perhaps trying to find a way to soothe the restless voices. Meanwhile, Sylvia Klein's hands moved rapidly over the controls of her recording equipment, eyes darting between the blinking lights and her notes. Her scientific skepticism was cracking under the weight of what she was witnessing. The acoustic anomalies she recorded defied explanation, patterns that warped and twisted, voices layered upon voices, some angelic, others grotesque. The data revealed a dissonance that no natural phenomenon could produce. "This isn't just sound," Sylvia muttered, her voice strained. "It's alive. It's manipulating the environment. The core isn't just a memory, it's a force." Marcus Engel, the steadfast mountaineer, moved through the shadows with practiced caution, his weather-beaten face tight with concern. He whispered urgently to Lena Moritz near a shattered window, the pale mountain light casting their elongated forms against the frost-bitten stone. "We can't stay here much longer," Marcus said, voice low but firm. "The chore's grip is tightening, we need a plan. Now." Lena nodded, her youthful features grim. "The texts hint at hidden passages, but they don't say where exactly. We have to find them before it's too late." The oppressive silence was shattered by the choir's relentless singing, a chilling symphony that seemed to echo from every corner and none. It was a song of devotion, madness, and eternal torment, a reminder that the monks who once inhabited this place had vanished, their bodies lost but their voices trapped in a dark pact. As the minutes stretched into hours, the atmosphere thickened with frozen fear. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision. Whispers slithered beneath the chanting, carrying promises and threats intertwined. Trust frayed among the survivors. Marcus found himself questioning Elena's increasing acceptance of the supernatural, while Jonna's absence haunted every step. The core's influence was no longer subtle. It invaded their dreams, twisted their thoughts, and eroded the thin veneer of reason each clung to. One by one, the members of the expedition felt the pull, the temptation to surrender to the eternal song, to become part of the hollow choir themselves. Elena's humming grew louder, her eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow and resolve that unsettled Marcus. "We have to hold on," she whispered. "There's a thread of light in the darkness. We can't let it consume us." But even as she spoke, the walls seemed to close in, the cold intensifying, and the voices swelling to a crescendo that promised oblivion. The chapter closed with the survivors huddled together, caught between despair and a flicker of hope. As the hollow choir's song echoed endlessly through the monastery's frozen halls, threatening to claim them one by one, the frigid air bit through layers of clothing as Marcus led the group deeper into the monastery's twisting corridors. Each step echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the vast, empty spaces. The chanting was everywhere and nowhere, a spectral tide rising and falling with cruel rhythm. "I can't explain it," Sylvia said quietly, adjusting her instruments. "The layers of sound, they're almost sentient. It's as if the choir knows we rehear." Lena's fingers traced the ancient inscriptions on the wall, her breath fogging in the icy air. "These texts speak of a binding ritual, one that sacrificed flesh for voice. The monks became their own choir, trapped between worlds. Marcus swallowed hard. And now we were caught in their song. The group paused as a sudden chill swept the corridor. Elena's eyes glazed momentarily, her lips moving in silent prayer. "They were reaching out," she said, "trying to pull us in." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, muscles tense. "We need to keep moving." Staying still only lets the choir close in. Suddenly, a faint movement flickered at the edge of Marcus's vision. He spun around, heart hammering, but found only empty stone. The chanting surged, voices overlapping, some sweet, some grotesque, weaving a tapestry of sound that tugged at the soul. "We were losing them," Marcus whispered, dread settling like ice in his chest. Elena reached out, her hand brushing his arm. "We still have each other. We were not alone." But as the choir's song grew louder, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. The monastery was no longer just a place. It was a prison of sound and silence, of faith twisted into endless despair. And the survivors were its next victims. The ancient chamber was cold beyond reason, a chill that seemed to seep not just from the stone walls, but from the very air itself. Marcus Hale sat hunched over a brittle parchment, his fingers trembling slightly as the candlelight flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like specters across the room. Elena Voss stood close by, her dark eyes scanning the faded script with a growing sense of dread. The chanting, ever-present and relentless, thrummed in their ears, a haunting melody that seemed both distant and intimately close. As though the voices were breathing just beneath the surface of reality. This is it," Marcus murmured, his voice low but charged with a mixture of disbelief and horror. "The ritual, the pact they made." Elena's lips parted slightly, a whisper barely audible over the persistent choir. "They sacrificed their bodies to become this. To transcend flesh and live on as voices, trapped forever in this endless chant." The words hung heavy between them, the weight of centuries pressing down like the alpine snows that encased the monastery. Marcus's mind reeled, struggling to reconcile the historian's rationality with the supernatural terror unfolding around them. The monks hadn't vanished, they had become something else entirely, disembodied souls bound by a dark, irrevocable covenant. Suddenly, a faint chill swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candle flame and plunging them into darkness. Marcus's breath hitched as a figure emerged from the shadows, a wraith-like form robed in faded ecclesiastical garb, eyes hollow yet burning with sorrow. Father Ambrose. The ghostly abbot's gaze locked onto Marcus, unblinking and profound. Though he spoke no words, a silent communication passed between them, a warning, a lament, a plea. He gestured toward the distant corridors where the choir's voices swelled and warped, their haunting melodies shifting from angelic grace to grotesque torment in an instant. Elena stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Father Ambrose, what price did you pay for this eternal song?" The apparition's form shimmered, the space around him pulsating with the choir's spectral resonance. He seemed caught between worlds, a soul tethered by duty and damnation. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a suffocating silence that quickly filled again with the relentless echoing chant. Dra. Sylvia Klein, who had been quietly observing nearby, adjusted her equipment nervously. The instruments beeped softly, capturing the spectral sound waves that defied all scientific explanation. These acoustic patterns. "They are not natural," she said, her voice tight with tension. "It's as if the voices are layered, existing simultaneously in multiple frequencies and dimensions." Marcus rubbed his temples, the enormity of their discovery pressing in on him from all sides. The monks' souls, trapped in this spectral choir, bound by faith twisted into a curse. Elena's gaze drifted to the frozen window, where the swirling snow outside mirrored the icy grip tightening around their hearts. "And it reaches out to us, to all who come here seeking answers." Later, alone in one of the monastery's endless corridors, Elena found herself humming softly along with the choir's calls. Her breath misted in the frigid air as the voices wove around her, a lament of lost devotion and eternal imprisonment. Each note was a thread pulling at her soul, a sorrowful hymn that threatened to unravel the fragile barrier between the living and the dead. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, she felt the weight of centuries, the hopes, the fears, the madness that had consumed the monks. The choir was no mere echo. It was a prison, a testament to the dangers of blind faith and the cost of spiritual obsession. As she opened her eyes, the faintest trace of a smile flickered on her lips, bittersweet and haunting. "They are not gone," she whispered to the empty hall, "but trapped. And so are we if we do not find a way out." Marcus's voice crackled over the radio from the other side of the monastery, breaking the spell. "Elena, we need to regroup. The others are growing weaker. The choir's hold is spreading." She nodded, swallowing the chill that threatened to freeze her very soul. The revelation of the pact had changed everything. The monastery was no longer just a mystery to solve, it was a battleground for their very survival. The hollow choir continued to sing, its voices weaving through the shadows, a timeless echo of faith corrupted and frozen in fear. And somewhere in the depths of the monastery, the price of devotion awaited them all. The candlelight flickered uncertainly as Marcus and Elena pored over the ancient manuscript. The ink faded and the parchment brittle with age. The script detailed a forbidden ritual, an unholy covenant forged in desperation and fanaticism. The monks had sought to transcend their mortal forms, to become eternal vessels of faith through sacrifice. But the price was far greater than they could have imagined. Outside, the chanting swelled, rising and falling like the breath of some great, unseen beast. It was at once beautiful and terrifying, a symphony of voices that seemed to come from every direction and none at all. "We are not alone," Marcus whispered, eyes scanning the darkened corners of the chamber. Elena nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the faded words. "The choir is alive, bound to this place but reaching out." A sudden movement caught Marcus's eye. The ghostly figure of Father Ambrose materialized before them, his presence both commanding and sorrowful. The abbot's hollow eyes seemed to pierce through Marcus's very soul, conveying a message without uttering a single word. Father Ambrose raised a hand, pointing toward the sealed crypts beneath the monastery. This is where it began, Marcus thought he understood. The source of the pact. Dra. Sylvia Klein's voice crackled through the radio, full of a mixture of fear and fascination. The acoustic readings are off the charts. The voices are not just echoes, they re-imprinted into the very fabric of the building. Marcus swallowed hard. The monks didn't just disappear. They became the choir. Their souls trapped in eternal limbo, singing a hymn of oblivion. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We must find a way to break the pact before we join them." The monastery groaned around them, the stones shifting as if in response. The hollow choir's song grew louder, an overwhelming tide of sound that threatened to drown their sanity. In that moment, Marcus realized the chilling truth. Faith could be a prison as much as a salvation. And in the depths of this forsaken place, salvation was a fading hope drowned in a sea of frozen fear. The pact was unveiled. The air within the monastery grew heavier that night, thick with a presence that defied reason, yet demanded recognition. Elena sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor of the chapel, her back straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her limbs. The hollow choir's ethereal chanting swirled about her like a living, breathing mist, tendrils of sound weaving through the vaulted arches and settling deep within her chest. Her eyes were closed, lips parted in a quiet hum that matched the haunting melody. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks, unbidden but not unwelcome. Each note of the chant was both a lament and a promise, a paradoxical symphony that spoke of loss and transcendence, of devotion and damnation. Elena's journey to this moment had been torturous. Raised in a devout family, she had always believed in the sanctity of faith. Yet the monastery's hollow choir had exposed her to a faith warped beyond recognition, a devotion that had consumed the monks entirely, leaving nothing but their disembodied voices to echo into eternity. In embracing this spectral chorus, she felt a connection to those lost souls, a fragile thread of hope amid the oppressive darkness. Meanwhile, not far away, Marcus sat hunched over a desk cluttered with ancient manuscripts and brittle parchment. Candlelight flickered, casting uneasy shadows that danced across his sharp features. His fingers trembled as he traced arcane symbols and passages describing the forbidden ritual that had bound the monks to this eternal limbo. The truth was unraveling before him. The dark pact that promised spiritual transcendence had instead corrupted faith itself. Marcus, the rational historian who had grounded the expedition with skepticism and reason, now found his lifelong beliefs teetering on the edge of collapse. He whispered bitterly to himself, "This cannot be real, it's madness." But the signs were undeniable. The choir's voices, at times angelic and at others grotesque, filled every corner of the monastery, suffocating rational thought. The architecture seemed to pulse with malevolent life, the stone walls whispering secrets that defied understanding. Father Ambrose's ghostly figure materialized silently at the threshold of the chamber where Marcus sat. His wraith-like form, robed and hollow-eyed, radiated a sorrowful warning. The choir's crescendo enveloped the room, the cacophony both beautiful and terrifying, a sound that threatened to shatter minds. Marcus looked up, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and despair. The apparition gestured vaguely, as if urging him to heed the price of corrupted faith. Yet the historian's stubborn rationality faltered, his heart heavy with the weight of a truth too horrifying to accept. In another wing, Dudra. Sylvia Klein's scientific instruments began to glitch wildly. The meters flickered erratically, unable to process the choir's unnatural frequencies. Her face paled as the objective reality she clung to warped beneath the supernatural influence. She muttered, "This defies every law of acoustics. It's impossible." The team's fragile unity frayed as Alina's spiritual acceptance clashed with Marcus's crumbling skepticism and Sylvia's scientific confusion. The choir's dark influence tightened its grip, threatening to consume their sanity and their very souls. Alina rose from the chapel floor, voice steady despite the dread curling in her stomach. "We can't fight with reason alone," she said softly. "This faith, it's broken, yes, but it's also alive. It calls to us even now." Marcus shook his head, voice hoarse. "Faith corrupted is no salvation. It's a prison, a trap. We must find a way out before it's too late." The choir's voices swelled, drowning their words in a swell of sound that seemed to seep into their bones. Frozen fear gripped them all, mingling with despair and a reluctant, trembling hope. As the night deepened, the thin line between devotion and damnation blurred irrevocably, leaving the explorers caught in a liminal space where faith itself was both weapon and wound, salvation and curse. Their ordeal was far from over, and the choir's hollow song promised that the darkest trials still awaited. The chapter closed on a chilling note amid the echoing chants. A final question hung in the frosty air: how could faith survive when its very foundation was corrupted beyond recognition? The answer lay hidden in the frozen shadows of the monastery, awaiting those desperate enough to seek it, and strong enough to endure the consequences. The frozen abyss, a biting cold unlike any natural chill, gripped the ancient stones of the monastery, settling deep into the bones of those who dared to trespass within its forsaken walls. Jutta Marcus Hale pulled his coat tighter, but the fabric seemed to offer no sanctuary against the supernatural frost creeping through the cathedral's vast nave. His breath emerged in ragged clouds, each exhalation a visible testament to the unyielding cold that defied explanation. Around him, the disembodied chants swelled, echoing through the vaulted ceilings and shadowed recesses. The voices were at once angelic and grotesque, a haunting chorus that pierced the silence with spectral fingers. This was no mere sound. It was a presence, a living force that warped the very air. Marcus's sharp eyes scanned the frost-laden floor, the frozen dust motes drifting in the pale light filtering through stained glass windows. His journal lay open at his side, notes hastily scribbled in trembling script. The cold is not environmental, he muttered to himself, voice nearly lost amid the eerie harmonies. It is something else. Elena Voss knelt nearby, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes wide and luminous in the dim glow. She hummed softly, echoing the chants with a reverence that unsettled Marcus. Her fingers traced the icy flagstones, as if seeking to draw strength from the stone itself. "They are still here," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe and fear, not in body, but in spirit, bound, frozen. Her words hung in the frigid air as the temperature seemed to plummet further, frost creeping up the walls like spectral ivy. The monastery had become a tomb not just of flesh, but of faith and soul, suspended in an eternal winter of despair. Sylvia Klein sat apart, her instruments buzzing and flickering in erratic patterns. "This defies all known physics," she said, eyes darting between her equipment and the chanting. "The acoustic anomalies correlate with a temperature gradient far beyond any natural cause. It's as if the sound itself is drawing heat away, creating a void." Marcus approached her, gripping the edge of a splintered pew. "What does that mean?" "It means," Sylvia replied, voice tight with disbelief, "that the monastery is a locus of some kind of cosmic phenomenon. The chants. They are not just echoes, but a force that consumes energy, life energy." A sudden gust swept through the nave, extinguishing the flickering candles and plunging the chamber into a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. The chanting faltered, then surged back with renewed ferocity, voices weaving through the shadows like serpents. A chill ran down Marcus's spine as a wraith-like figure materialized near the altar. Father Ambrose, robed and hollow-eyed, his visage both terrible and sorrowful. The ghostly abbot's gaze seemed to pierce through to the very essence of the monastery's curse. He raised a spectral hand, pointing downward, toward the crypt beneath the nave. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his chest. The abyss beneath the monastery was no mere void, but a chasm of cosmic damnation where faith had been corrupted into eternal imprisonment. Elena's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper but resolute. "We stand on the edge of that abyss. To step back is to survive. To step forward is to be consumed." Marcus clenched his fists, battling the terror that clawed at his reason. The frozen air was a physical weight, pressing down on mind and body alike. The Choa's voices beckoned, promising salvation or doom in equal measure. As the cold seeped deeper into their souls, the explorers faced the unbearable truth. The monastery was a nexus where faith and damnation intertwined, a frozen abyss that threatened to swallow all hope. The question that haunted Marcus as he stared into the darkness was not if they could escape, but whether any part of themselves could survive the journey back from this haunted sanctum. The Choa's song rose again, a chilling crescendo that echoed across the endless stone. A reminder that some voices were never meant to be silenced and some fears never overcome. And in that frozen abyss, the line between salvation and perdition blurred beyond recognition. The air was thick with frost as Marcus moved cautiously through the nave, the echoing chants wrapping around him like a living shroud. His journal was clutched tightly, the pages damp with condensation, yet he forced himself to write. Every word was a testament against the encroaching madness, a desperate attempt to anchor his unraveling mind. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer or perhaps communion. The spectral cold seemed to swirl around her, yet she bore it with a serene strength that both comforted and terrified Marcus. He wished he possessed such faith. Sylvia's instruments sputtered and died, leaving only the choir's voices as the sole sound in the cathedral's frozen heart. She glanced at Marcus, her expression pale and strained. "We are losing the battle against this. Whatever it is," she said quietly. Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The abyss beneath the monastery was not merely a physical void, it was a cosmic maw, hungry for souls, frozen in an eternal lament. As the Choa's voices rose to a haunting climax, Marcus realized that the true horror was not the cold, nor the vanished monks, but the knowledge that faith could become a a frozen abyss from which there was no escape. He closed his eyes briefly, hearing the Koa's endless chant echoing through the stone and into his bones. The frozen fear was no longer just around them, it was within them, a chilling echo of their own fragile mortality. The night stretched on, endless and merciless, as the explorers stood on the edge of the abyss between salvation and eternal silence. The frozen Choa continued to sing,